The funny thing yesterday, Qantas, the world's most woke airline, same-sex marriage, global warming. Well, its domestic chief executive, Andrew David, yesterday found just how useful global warming can be when he blamed it for causing delays to some Qantas flights over the past 4 months. Higher winds, he said. Don't blame Qantas for your flight not leaving in time or being cancelled altogether just when you're in a rush. It's just global warming. Off our hands. Don't blame God or what? No, blame mankind, not Qantas. It's a very strange global warming, I must say. It suddenly causes higher winds just in the past 4 months and just here. I hadn't noticed. I don't think the Bureau of Meteorology had noticed, but perfect excuse. Bushfires, same sort of thing. Don't blame local officials for having been too slack in burning off fuel loads, for instance. It's not their fault. It's global warming. And the media left, well, they'll fall for that every single time because that excuse, well, that just suits their playbook completely. Anything that helps the crusade to spread this new religion, welcome. The other day, I was listening to the ABC radio in the morning preparing for the show. Got to keep an eye on the crazies, good material. In less than 90 minutes on the ABC, I heard 3 different stories, each promoting the global warming scare. 3. Radio National Breakfast, global warming and fires. AM, global warming. Virginia Trioli on Melbourne 774, global warming. A council has just claimed there's a climate emergency. Got to give them a big go on the radio. Now, I've asked, where has the Morrison government been in all this? Why isn't it calling out the ABC bias for a start when it's funding the ABC $1 billion a year with our money? And why hasn't it been calling out the global warming scaremongers? Well, good news. The Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, yesterday finally did do just that. Even better, he did it on the ABC itself, just as it was winding up for yet another serve of this mad claim that these bushfires we're seeing, as we tend to see every year, these bushfires were actually caused, you guessed it, by global warming. Well, actually worse. These bushfires were caused by the refusal of this wicked Morrison government to cut our emissions of carbon dioxide. Well, Scott Morrison had finally had enough of that.
Suggest that with just at 1.3% of global emissions, that Australia doing something differently, more or less, would have changed the fire outcome this season. I don't think that stands up to any credible scientific evidence at all.
Of course, it's absolutely correct. And it's such a depressing sign of the madness around today that we really do get people in the media, in politics, wherever, activists, somehow thinking that if we cut Australia's emissions, the world's temperature will suddenly drop, and drop so much that big bushfires in this country, bushfires, thing of the past, finished, gone. But, you know, even when Scott Morrison delivered that fairly obvious rebuttal, on and on the ABC interviewer went, undeterred, seemingly unable to compute or accept that Australia cannot change the climate and stop global warming.
Former Chief of Victorian Country Fire Service Neil Bibby says the federal government fundamentally doesn't like talking about climate change and that politics is the reason why the federal government is ignoring their advice.
Well, bad Bibby, that's all I can say. And even worse are the Greens, actually in our parliament. I mean, complete fools blaming the government for the fires.
Had every opportunity to minimise the risk of these catastrophic fires, and instead it has chosen to pour fuel on the fire.
You are no better than a bunch of arsonists.
Now, I thought this week perfectly demonstrated the sheer idiocy of these people. The utter idiocy. Well, this week demonstrated this to people with eyes to see and brains to think. How could we possibly have had these bushfires in South Australia. I mean, South Australia, that is the greenest state in the country. It's the state that's got the toughest global warming policies of all. It's got the biggest share of wind power. It's got the highest power prices. This is the state that even blew up its last coal-fired power station. And yet, despite all that, can you believe it? It's still got bushfires. Well, of course it does. I mean, what moron would think that South Australia can change the temperature in South Australia? It can't do that, just like Australia can't change the temperature in Australia. We're just too small. This whole global warming scaremongering is just, it's just beyond belief now. Absolutely manic. Well, at least Scott Morrison said something about it this week. Now, wouldn't you love to hear more people get a bit of guts and start calling it out?